Well there everyone, you know who I am, ETTemplar, Supreme Misfit Professional Dipshit, and we got a weird topic, Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traoré. So before we get into it, special thank you to lead captains over here who donated the time and money to keep this channel running, and viewers like you. So this is just a strange, interesting topic that I cover because one, I find stuff going on in Africa pretty interesting, as well as the underhanded just tactics and corruption from the West in general when involving Africa. So here's Ibrahim Traoré, and there's that. And of course, if you want to know where Burkina Faso is, it's right there north of Mali. The east is Niger, and the south is Ghana. So kind of in a tough spot there. But anyway, so who is Ibrahim Traoré? Ibrahim Traoré, born March 14th, 1988 in Kara, Burkina Faso, is a 37-year-old military officer and the interim president of Burkina Faso since September 20th, 2022. At the time, he became the world's youngest head of state after leading a coup to oust Paul-Henri Sandaogo, Namibia, who had himself seized power in January 2022. Traoré, a captain in the Burkinabe army, studied geology in the University of Ouagadougou. Sorry, I'm going to butcher the hell out of these names. And joined the military in 2009. He rose through the ranks, serving in Mali with UN peacekeeping forces, MINUSMA, and fighting jihadist insurgencies in Burkina Faso's north. Known for his quiet demeanor in school, he gained a reputation of courage and leadership in combat. So, why the West and anyone wants to depose this guy when he's fighting Mali jihadists is beyond me. Why people don't like this guy is fucking beyond me. It's absurd. It probably has something to do with what Burkina Faso has in resources, which we'll get into a minute after all this reading. So, rise to power. Traoré's coup was driven by frustration with Damiba's failure to curb escalating jihadist violence. So he wasn't doing shit about Islamic terrorism, and people were pissed off, which has plagued Burkina Faso since 2015. He accused the leadership of neglecting soldiers' needs, citing inadequate equipment, corrupt practices, bribing insurgents. So the previous president was bribing Muslim terrorist insurgents and not dealing with them. The September 2022 coup followed public outrage over an ambush that killed civilian soldiers. Traoré initially pledged to restore civilian rule by July 2024 per an ECOWAS agreement, but a new transition plan extends his mandate until at least 2029, allowing him to run in future elections. So it seems like this was a populist uprising by Ibrahim Traoré to seize power from a corrupt, ineffective leader who was essentially bribing terrorists to stop attacking the country. Key policies and actions: security and insurgency. Traoré promised to tackle the jihadist insurgency, which controls 40% of Burkina Faso's territory and has displaced over 2 million people. He mobilized 90,000 civilian volunteers for the defense of the homeland, VDP, but violence has worsened, with deaths nearly tripling since 2022. Critics argue his all-military approach and alleged forced conscription have failed to restore stability. That's debatable because if there was no military before, I would say that you have to maintain order. You can't maintain order through bribing terrorists. And economic reforms. So this is where he gets in trouble. This is where the West hates him, I'm assuming. Traoré nationalized 2 gold mines. There we have it. And the main reason why the West doesn't like Ibrahim Traoré, he nationalized the mines and opened Burkina Faso's first gold refinery to process 150 tons annually, aiming to retain resource wealth. Again, a big problem for globalists because this gives Burkina Faso the wealth and money to remain independent, to fund their militaries, and to not be dependent on anyone. They can depend on themselves and their own wealth, and that's what France hates. France has had about 100 years of absolute domination, corruption within West Africa. He also invested agriculture and infrastructure like Ouagadougou Dosen Airport. Economic projections suggest 8% annual growth from 2025 to 2043, potentially lifting 2.4 million out of poverty. So again, big problem to the West, and you can dare say imperialistic powers of Europe and other countries like China, because now Burkina Faso is becoming independent, not needing to have to depend on corrupt politicians from the West, and without corrupt politicians to steal Burkina Faso's gold resources. And when countries in Africa tend to get more independent from the West generally, or European powers, that's where it becomes a big fucking problem. And I'm all for it, because like Europe, I mean Africa needs to stand on its own. And the fact that he's invested in agriculture too also means that they're dependent on their own food. So now their own food isn't dependent upon United Nations and other Western countries throttling back food donations to maintain population, right? You don't have that evil angle of the United Nations grip on just food for the people of Burkina Faso. And for the longest time, I think the UN, the West, the Illuminati consortium, whatever you want to call it, has been using food to control Africa for probably hundreds of years, and to essentially plunder the resources and just economic growth of Africa through this means. It's like with Somalia, right? Uh, Agriculture. Okay, so we've read that. Anti-corruption. So here's another reason why. His populist cause. He has reversed salary increases for officials, kept it his captain salary, and arrested figures like former Minister Vincent Dabalogu for embezzlement. However, governance reforms lag, and inefficiencies in the state enterprise remain concerned. So again, he's battling corruption, much like what's happening with Trump in our government with Doge and that. So that's why he's also a hated man. He's not only regained control of Burkina Faso for Burkina Faso and the people, throttling away corrupt power from Europeans and the West. So now you can kind of see where you're getting the picture, right? Ibrahim Traoré is a populist, bringing order and control back to the people of Burkina Faso versus the New World Order, if you believe that. Fugal leadership. Traore, I've said his name for 20 times, so bear with me. Swapped luxury presidential vehicles for a 2011 Land Rover and provided 2013 Padre Jeeps to rural doctors, emphasizing austerity. So not only did he downgrade his presidential vehicle, but provided Jeeps to rural doctors to help his own people. So this guy, to me, yeah, he seized power from a coup, but for the people. So any opposition to this guy is basically New World Order consortium bullshit. They want him out because, again, he's a populist guy. He's giving his power back to his people, and he's a threat. And of course, he's the mines and the refinery he's built has now been nationalized, so that can't be stolen out of Burkina Faso. It's been nationalized, so foreign entities and corporations can't steal that away from them. Foreign policy shift. Traore has distanced Burkina Faso from its former colonial power, France, like we mentioned, expelling French troops in 2023 and ending French aid agreements, which is good because then France cannot hold a bargaining chip over your head or bully Burkina Faso to act or legislate certain ways. And blames Western powers for Burkina Faso's woes. That's 100% correct in my opinion. Instead, he forged ties with Russia, and that's really the big problem. Is he's giving power back to his people, and he sided with Russia, the big baddie, those damn dirty big baddie Russians. Inviting Africa Corps, formerly Wagner Group mercenaries in Turkey, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, formed the Alliance of Sahel States after withdrawing from ECOWAS, citing its failure to address economic address jihadist threats and foreign influence. So again, he was pushed to Russia because of ECOWAS and Western failure of military aid, NATO, and other groups. So he was driven to the arms of the Russians and Turkey. So I mean, if the West isn't doing their job, like they're, and I deeply suspect that there's tons of corruption within these Western military groups and organizations too, and they don't really give a shit. So he's just moved to a side that's going to get shit done. The shift aligns with Traoré's pan-African anti-Western rhetoric, drawing comparisons to Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader from 1980s. Popularity and criticism. Traoré enjoys significant domestic support, especially among youth, with the Afrobarometer reporting 66% of acceptance to military rule, up from 24% in 2012. His bold reforms and defiance of the West resonate widely, as seen in the loud applause he received in Ghana's presidential inauguration in July 2025 on X. Supporters praise his push for self-reliance and resource control, calling him the new Sankara. However, critics label him as a dictator, pointing out stalled elections, media censorship. But that was probably going on during the previous administration too. So it's funny how they complain about media censorship and stalled elections and dictatorship when the West has been funding a proverbial dictator to steal the resources of Burkina Faso. So it's funny how they wheel that shit out when they've been the ones guilty for it. We could probably assume that U.S. aid was responsible to funding this like corrupt opposition to Ibrahim Traoré before he came to power, and CIA and other Western intel agencies, guaranteed. I bet my kidney on it. Suspending BBC and Voice America and arrests of dissenters like Dr. Aurora Laura, multiple coup attempts, including a foiled plot in April 2025, allegedly based in Ivory Coast, highlight military fragmentation and his precarious grip on power. And to be fair, that these coup attempts and other military fragmentation is probably due to intel agencies in the West, from France, America, United Kingdom, and dabbling to try and overthrow this guy because they want Burkina Faso's fucking gold and resources, and they want Burkina Faso back under the heel of the New World Order. Challenges and outlook. Burkina Faso ranks 185th out of 193 on the Human Developmental Index, with 64.5% of its population multidimensionally poor. Despite rich resources like gold and zinc, mismanagement risks derailing Traoré's industrial efforts. The ongoing insurgency, humanitarian crisis, 2 million displaced, 878 million aid needed, and fractured civil society threaten collapse. While Traoré's vision of self-reliance inspires hope, his authoritarian measures and reliance on Russian support raise concerns about long-term stability. Which is funny because the country was probably considerably worse under the previous guy. But then again, this Gronk got this information from multiple news agencies. So some of this information, I tell you, is probably tainted a little bit against Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traoré, to be fair. So conclusion, Ibrahim Traoré is a polarizing figure, a revolutionary to his supporters, a risky autocrat to detractors. His reform aims to break Burkina Faso's cycle of poverty and dependency, and really that's the main goal of this whole issue here, is that Burkina Faso is breaking away from the New World Order and its dependence on the West, and that's why they hate them. That's why the media is pronouncing this guy a dictator and tyrant, even though the previous guy was fucking up the country and letting foreigners and West and probably maybe even the Chinese plunder Burkina Faso's resources. But escalating violence and governance hurdles cast doubt on his ability to deliver. Comparisons to Sankara reflect his ambition, but also the high stakes. Sankara was assassinated after 4 years. Traoré's survival, 16 reported assassination attempts, and success hinge on balancing security, development, and democratic pressures in a volatile region. They've tried to kill this guy 16 times. And that's it. That's Burkina Faso in a nutshell. And I'm also going to tell you, okay, so the current, just for posterity. So Burkina Faso's exports gold, right? So gold per ounce is $3,311 per ounce. So if Burkina Faso locks down, they've already nationalized their gold mines and refinery. If they shut that down for 5 years and sit on the gold that they take from their own land, if they sit on that for 5 years, they could potentially be a major power in Africa. And not only that, with all that gold that they sit on, that gives them more power and bargaining table, more independence, and that is why Ibrahim Traoré has to go, according to the New World Order and the consortium and whoever else is a part of it. He's got to go because Burkina Faso, freedom and liberty is contagious. And once this breaks out in Africa, the New World Order, the consortium, the United Nations has a big fucking problem because they will lose their grasp on Africa, and they will lose their grasp on all those resources. And it's like with what's happening in Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's a video for later. But what the New World Order and the West fears is this kind of self-reliance and populism taking off and spreading across Africa. And they're thinking, they hope if they can dispose Ibrahim Traoré and the populist movement going on in Burkina Faso, then they can essentially, you know, suppress, silence, and control Africa once again. But the main reason why this guy is such a threat, because he's in bring change to bring back Burkina Faso's nationalism, self-reliance, independence, and control of its own resources and a national destiny. And that's why they hate him. That's why the media is trying to make him out to be some bloodthirsty dictator who's really seizing the baddies. He's aligning with Putin, right? So it's just amazing to see how they react to African nations regaining some form of national control. Anyways, hopefully you found this interesting, enlightening. See you next time. God bless. Have a good one, and I'll see you.
Patriotism is dead. There's only rebels and tyrants now.
Strange.
A world ready for the righteous and the pure to inherit.
Don't believe in surrenders. No, I still got my saber, Reverend. Didn't turn it into no plowshare either.
I'm taking over this territory.